为北疆北呀海北刷罗，为北疆北呀南北让中，只为张南波兰去，所谓北罗北黄花东。
nhớ rồi cho này cho gì cho phụ gì suốt lời ạ, ta sẽ na cũng tăng ta sợ nhau cho hắn để cái mấy phụ lúc chết lên nữa này, lúc chết lên nó thì hiện tại Washington DC, lúc nào giờ lúc sáng lên tu lúc cậu ý, cú ha quý từ tiền lâu cú tua, ha chủ tịch cái chính nhân trên cái bên mong ý chữ rư nhau cho hú tây chờ nhau lang. giờ lên đã bây giờ lấy tàu cái chúa tổ chọn đã chết lấy Washington DC tuần trước tên nội tây chứ hàng chục bộ thẳng sai bộ mấy chỗ họ kể từ yếu hà tàu của lô tây chờ chỉ sau qua lên đã vì hà ta bây nãy chỉ bây sinh quan chùa cho lô tây chờ tàu tới nan tàu xong lũ lại mà giờ lên đã ra nó vậy ra cái bây tuần trước hà tăng cho nên cái tổ hồ nhà lang tây tổ ở nhau cho chỉ châu lô tây gần đấy lô tây chờ mấy cả cho lô sinh bồi yên sinh bằng tổ bây giờ tao chỉ lấy cái nô sa cầu một cho nô cầu y nó giờ nô cái sầu, giờ lúc sau nó giờ lúc chạy cái sầu bây giờ tụi sa lù cho hắn để nó hạ bây lù hạ把主让个bây giờ卡cho mấy bao hạt bây giờ hạt lang chỉ cho để nó mấy chỗ này trồng sắn cho trồng phong như suốt lời giờ của tôi yên卡cho bây hạt tại nhau cho để lúc tí chơi nhau là nấu chữ nhau là tao mua bây công ăn để bây lúc sinh giờ cho là mong chỉ trang ở đây nụ mùa cho lửa lúa tây chờ là giờ cho lửa lúa tây chờ tôi sau là sẽ tôi thuê cho ăn đấy ở làng ở lúa nhỏ giờ chua lúa xong lấy cái mấy bù xong nó thầu lúa trâu liền đâu nó xa cầu tây chờ nhà làng tàu sẽ bắt thua là sẽ biểu tình can tây tiền cầu cho cậu tây vì giờ bây công ăn hay là lúa an ninh mạng giờ hạ cho internet nhau cho sẵn đâu là sẽ kế sử sẵn đâu cho tôi này kế sử做路 mà giờ ra nó bây tôi cho hắn để nó giờ ao nhà nó thâu lên để giờ kiến trình nè giờ kiến trình chỉ mua cái yêu pay nhau cho để lúc tí chơi nhá lang mà bây xa tôi cho ra nó hát thâu lên để dạng tiếp lâu giờ hạ dù nụ chữ nhá lang này chỉ cho này cho bây sinh cho tí dạng cái chạy uốn nành chỉ trâu chạy là giờ chỉ mua cái yêu pay cho tôi này cái uốn nành về lên để bây xa tôi cho ra nó chỉ xây là giờ cho mong cái muaเลยmấy tôi nói của hà mong hà lù lại muaเลยcứ lặng ít bùa tự phang tụ mong nhau chốt lại anh nhá là chỉ mua đông tới chỉ mua hủ tiền hủ khẩu hay chỉ mua chế mình thư giờ lên đây cho mong là nhau tao bọn na là tê là chỉ mua ua giờ vừa ăn họ từ là vừa chỉ tàu giờ vừa lúc chơi là vừa chỉ tàu mấy nhóm mong cái đông tới dù lớp 6 là sẽ không trâu sư là bao chỉ bu mong lại giờ có mua nhà xa chỉ mong dù không chua sư bao chỉ bu mong dù không cậu a tây dạng lên nói giờ tây dạng cái chỉ tạo tôi này lưu chuẩn để cái chính dạng gì mà bây giờ lấy tôi hại cho nó nhớ chuẩn để lưu chế lên để cái nụ chữ mấy cả cho chơi ở trên nụ nó bây giờ tao muốn chỉ cho bộ ngoại giao Mỹ là State Department cái nhau chuẩn để Washington DC bây giờ tao thẳng lấy ao lúc xuống mông dù tiền tây mình bà hàng cái tao trầu bây giờ sử dụng trong mông rong lên đó sau này họ cái lưu trang plei giờ hạ dù cái trình lúc đi chơi nhá là tàu cho huấn đông tới hạ ta cái trình yêu pay hạ tàu sản để thông cho căn đầu xử lý United Nations hạ ta bỏ cho cái trình yêu pay但是họ tranh ta tin tới giờ bỏ ở lục làng xứ你只摸tranh hồ bỏ lúc đi chơi yên chỉ摸cái trình yêu pay họ cái菜刀的只摸cái trình yêu pay giá của hạ thì nó luôn ra cho mình nông xử lý mấy cái ý là chỉ mà nụ chữ của mấy quan tới thảo nụ chữ mà mấy cha lại ở tàu nụ chữ bu mấy cha ở tàu,但是thảo cái mấy quan tới một thảo nụ chữ là chẳng đông tới một số cho ta nụ chữ trả lại chữ hay chữ bu mấy ở, mà giờ lên tới họ tới buôn giá của bên mua bên cho information là sự buôn giá của bao bên họ kiểm tra ở trong chữ, chỉ buôn trả lại chữ là họ tới chữ bu bên có, giờ nụ cái tàu ăn tới một thảo bu, buôn tàu chữ bu có lại, chỉ có chủ đa. họ hắn tại nói vậy họ cái chính dạng về cái nội chữ sử dụng cái làm ra là chỉ bị sinh có ở lên nội chữ hà ta sẽ thâu ở tàu giờ ít chút lúa cái cho cái là mua cái khí ở chỗ cái đi chỉ tàu mình tại nó bị to hà chủ tây dạng cái chính dạng trên nó hà xử lý cái bị công án cái mấy chỉ tàu bao giờ hà mong hà lúa bị trên chỗ mong chỉ tàu bao lúa tây chờ nhà lang chỉ giờ nhà lang lúa tây chờ nhà lang giờ chỉ cho bao dạng to này lúa 被mong rồi cho被叫 minority 了是被叫人tộc thiểu số mà被sao sáng hà ta被chỉ mua phèn dù lúc đi chơi nhà lang càng lại cho nhà lang nhà lang khó để nó被yuộc kít lấy hình là chỉ cứ tin rằng khó cái của ta bị yuộc kít lấy hình bị chỉ công tiền trả cái nhà dân cho lúc đi chơi giờ ya bị nhau bị chơi ta là nhà lang có chịu bị rồi có không bị công sản có chịu bị có không bị có chỉ mua cái gì phèn sự này khó cái của hà ta bị chỉ sao nhau lên đầu vị đi chăng bên lúa chủ trò lúa lúa bên cho nát chỉ bên sẹp bên nát bên chỉ bên bù bên dẹp qua tàu mua tròn trang bùa lúa tây chờ chủ chính phủ nhà lãnh đạo ha tổ lúa tây chờ tranh lúa lúa tây chờ cho quả nát chỉ bên sẹp nọ càng nhau rồng ha nọ càng bự số当时主张弄那边关注落地车只摸给有碰着被测试下，原来在落地车但是呢，当摸被狗安要少了是要推着落地车，去生落地车个要多要被狗安推呢，要主要说被保安们还得要主要说。为哈达每家来伢类落地车来伢类，只摸一落地车个也摸包伢到某人拿到有被公安了是到推到少被公安还得伢做路上。原来的好个百姓伢啦补补在身体斗战过政府至少我领导也摸落地车摸了，结果还好个做没补好那没命。杨豆头哦，要做安基到多少香港了是说的么香港少做安基要相交在路上。个石头个鸟到香蕉在路上安基着干么香港包着干着说，那是说到真香港着路，来那个好给着路这，那弄香港着多年路省，玻璃也安基路省，路北还得安基着干了，但是着多年真要走着弄了，路对前伢啦，但是那被么脚有了一波浪多年，被都只么吃我那我好安都只么了。要他被这么被公安政府这么被公安那扫着路地前么扫着说的我，脚路上，将哪家自家路家几个多看出来多塞弄的脚路上都多当了，都没有个都有伢做红伢浪的，哎都要脚路上了，不应只找干一时内。原来的好好的那百姓不好的路地前多年都讲都只么安我那，要政府怎么家安家路扫我的那就说。là giờ lửa lúa tê chè tôi yếu cho ăn là nhau ổn làng ổn lúa cứ nào cứ hậu cho lúa tê chè nhá làng mà bên là chỉ bên sinh bên giờ quan chúa tao căn tại bên ta chỉ tao lúa cho căn lại lúa chọn tại lúa bê ta sử lúa cho tôi này yếu nhau giờ lên tại nó là chỉ bên sinh nhá làng bắt sa身体tự trạng nãy nương nó bên giờ mong là sự bên giờ mày nói thì bên ta tiền tại căn lại thì giờ hạ tao là ổn nhá làng khí nên chỉ giờ lấy mấy sáng cứ tìm mong lúa cho ý định trồng số lời bây giờ nhau là bây giờ我nhà lang khí bây giờ nhà lang nhau là bây giờ nhà lang khí bây giờ số nhau là bây giờ số khí但是bây sáng của mua peace mua kiến nhận chính nhau của mua nấu mua chữ nhau của chờ kiến mua chay ởตัวnày mà khó này là khó chịu chính giờ nó lúa sở tự trạng lúa sở hạ mấy chữ sở hạ mấy bự trâu rù cha của hai khó dùng gì cho mấy nãy nó bây giờ mong cái nhau hỗ trợ anh nhà làm bây tôi chỉ tại tôi muốn đầu lúc đi chờ cho chỉ tôi cho đi chờ thay cho chỉ tôi cho lão cho tê, cho chỉ mong cho số tê, cho chỉ mong cho pha mang tê, cho chỉ mong cho khám phổ địa tê, ít hồi tôi ít thay mà mong tôi cho căn lù nhau cho hữu dụng lúc đi chờ, vì bữa chỉ sáng nhau bữa giờ cho căn mong nhau cho nhà lang tê, vì bữa nhau hữu nhà lang lù hữu, bữa giờ chỉ để tôi lấy là bữa chỉ sáng hay ta bữa giờ cho căn mong nhau cho hữu, giờ giờ nó là bây tôi nhau cho hữu bây hai chân chủ luôn trái chủ kế nhận chính, bây chân chủ luôn tê luôn chờ đợi chẳng danh của tao chủ kế nhận chính luôn cho bây giờ lên đây là bây tôi chọn lão tê số tê Pama tê Campuchia India tê số tê tê là bây chỉ sáng nhà bây chỉ cho các món nhau cho bây lúc tê chở nhà là mà khó hơn để nói giờ khó ở của hà cho bây ta na nông nghiệp nó của hà của chỉ là tự trạng của lúc tê chở chuồn giấy mộng chỉ là của hà của cho bây tê kế phải kế cả lúc chúa lúc tê chở nhà làm gì mua但是của hà chở khó tranh của sáng của bây mong hà bây lử trắng to này nhau của tê chở nhà là bây giờ chủ tao cổng tiền chủ chở nhà là hà bây chủ tao ô phong yên chủ chở nhà là của sinh产kinh验进做路地球来安家啦，của bây nhau cho sa坡bây制造制造真材。每上的国下好那怎么真家国下来那做美，每是上山没约到一路吹，落到莫美过莫美我落单个美都只敢长路吹在莫下丢，但那不要经验进，考古时下位的喏。第二到呢不约到多路 TV 时都真是都莫后门路这个问题这个理。在我们罗nhà都是还都么，个有的多了么多是都真是都多过到农户都是，对头在么个了么都有了还都么，对样喏也对样个被我能只么给有配，我能只招杀，我能拆过就那个被蒙下拉干拆lang， giờ quỷ lên đó nó cũng xa lại hạ cho bên mong hành bảo lên nó họ bên tua cho tí nó về cho bà hạ chỉ một cái yêu phèn nà nó nó mấy cho bên chơi cái mấy hạt ta nổi chú ý cho cái yêu phèn cho mấy là hạ sư mấy cho sư hữu của họ lựa mình chạy quan chứ mấy chỉ讲我当门mấy chỉ讲我找沙坡mấy cho giờ làm luôn luôn ít ra thâu sư nổi chú tua cá tôm bò cho nổi chú nọ muốn chơi nổi chú chơi yuột lấy yuột chơi cho bò hậu mua nhà cho bò nọ su chơi bò菜家mấy nhau tôi giữ giờ mấy chỉ打bò lấy cái mấy thà của hàng này nó chơi mấy yên chỉ tay mình tôi养狗giờ lên đó đây养này giờ cái chân dạng gì cú sáng của mua inu từ tên là至少去绳子了tên là bên nhau cho sa lù cho lúa tí chờ nổi chú giờ bên tù bên nhau mua piece mua kiến dạng gì mua vàng phổ sơ lúa bên nhau bên cho sa phổ bên chỉ造chỉ chơi chân trái khó hơn để nói giờ khó cái cuốn chơi mà cuốn chơi lên là nó nằm mà hạ cho mày cho cái nhau hồ lúa tí chờ在古代多古到中那东阳宝的喏，那古臭做美，还古那弄窝的喏，要古10古路长了肉，我来捞做美，还古那弄10年在斗鸡，我来捞做美。为人在古臭生的养当地小妹要鸟来讲，嘛古臭我很宝的喏，是当然的是美用中一路路的古都一直下做美，要下他被打喏多打被咱们要掏门我炸被只要多能了。bây giờ xong dần đông lại giá trị在论场了bây giờ trả lo sáng nào lo多了到只在下路了那这被只下了到但是被这多被这大被人这也多能样啦被人这也懵被人本知道懵我炸被人咋知道懵我想运动要为领导股只补助给真正人找着被mà股差来手下很保的那着被mà股逃着每家个要着导干每啥要那弄晒股市但是股三个每家个要我好留下giờ mấy giờ tụi cái trồng mỏ, cũng giờ tụi cái cứ chua, cũng là nông trái chua cho mấy,但是mấy只敢在国家chua nọ,还mấy只敢让过cũng nó ta mấy mua mỏ, chỉ mấy tụi mỏ giờ只容易使内个地方，tụi mua mỏ giờ chuẩn rằng mà bây giờ bao họ ta mấy mua mỏ, bây giờ cứ chua bây mua cho cao cao giờ chủ敢在chua nọ mà có差来用，弄哪路地车不做不用，路地车要只干啥，说这要只找啥，要完成过知识，为领导。cú cha lấy tua hạ ô luôn nó cho bay mà cú sáng chơi mấy lô râu của mấy son trai sao cầu râu mua kế bay ở tàu mua lù bay ở hạ ấy nó nói một lần chỉ chân dạng gì bay ở chủ tàu sở hạ sở tổ tệ ô phong yêu sở hữu sinh chủ lô tí chờ chủ khu lô tí chờ chủ nọ chữ tàu danh lô tí chờ giờ nọ chữ ô chỉ giờ sao trả bố lên tàu但是sở tàu danh sở hạ bố của bố ở chủ tàu lồng giờ bố lên nó bay chỉ cảm nhau cho kế giải nhận dữ lại你norm没当到 OK， 但是没只包没 OK， 我来古都下梦下路了。没我拉对了要 OK， 没我让我落了要 OK， 没有对的牛也偷，还得梦着说对么？走一路长公安没就上一热水，走一路长公安没就上一路热水，没么走一路车都真是当没就提水热，么走一路都真是当没提水热。mà rồi lúc yên tôi cho mấy thầy xây ra mấy tôi nhiều mấy thao mong lấy inu kia thao lấy狗lúc chơi đáng là chứ mấy mùa tao mấy tôi chỉ tao nào lại vì lên đó tên là do cái chân dạng chuyện của cha sở hạ anh lúc nào của hạ cho mấy ta cho nó bố lên giờ ok mấy cháu qua la qua đây là giờ ok thảo cái lúc chơi đâu số tua bố mua cho nông công tua khổ sơn là sự tua quảng cáo cho mấy của mấy yếu bố cho nông công thảo mấy yếu tao bố cho nông công chờ rồi hút lại đây là bố của mấy yếu bố cho chua yếu thảo bố mua cho chua yếu chờ mua cho mấy tăng lại mà mấy sau đó cho công lu bố hai ta company to là sự company bông bén yang bảo na mấy mua bây giờ mấy chỉ mua chỉ càng lạ chỉ có chỉ mua có cho công giá lử có mua chỉ có giá bông bén giờ nên đã bây tôi ý想bây giờ chơi plan của cảnh bây giờ nhà tôi chỉ bảo cho cái bây giờ cho nông tôi chỉ bảo cho cái bây giờ cho chỉ cho lừa dọa tôi chỉ bảo cho cái bây giờ cho chua cho lừa tuần cho giờ nên đã bây tăng tạo ok cho chủ kế chế cộng sản mà nông nào bây sẽ tự trạng bây giờ tự trạng tụi nhà lang bây giờ tự trạng lúc đi chờ但是bây tự trạng chủ kế chế cộng sản有主导của lông của một cái nhà dân cho nãy giờ bây sinh trả lại chỉ quan注cho lúc đi chờ nhà lang nông nào ý dân trong nãy giờ cái tin trang của tôi nên chỉ bên bảo lên nó xứ của vợ hai cha sa ta mấy ở bù giáo video cái của trao cho ta hai ta chỉ ở bên mong chơi sinh chủ là sự của tụ khen chơi sinh chủ là sự chờ nhà lang chơi sinh chủ mình nông cho mấy cả cái của cho tận để nó hà lù cho mình nông sai cả tụ mấy cả bọn tụ chơi sinh chủ bảo đi chẳng hát但是呢不晒路地球要让低保来讲哎国美晒到家路当的那做文字每才要报好真我长到各种沙轮之美哈古多那只么事结果哈被路那做美事哎要容易种那这个定讲
Program is open before the Foreign Claims Settlement Commission. Again, it will take time and effort, but I think it's something that can be achieved given the strength of the Vietnamese American community and the profound injustice that so many Vietnamese Americans have been put through to have their properties expropriated. So again, it's very nice to be with all of you here today, as always. It's an honor and a privilege to stand in solidarity with my Vietnamese American friends who are fighting so strongly for human rights in Vietnam, and to play my small part to help advance your cause. And I wish you the best of luck later today. I'll be at a number of these meetings myself, so I'm sure I'll see some of you in the various offices that we go to, and look forward to working with you on Vietnam human rights going forward until the Vietnamese people have the kind of freedom, democracy, and human rights that all of us here in the United States as Americans have been so blessed to have in terms of our form of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Now it's my privilege to introduce Congressman Alan Lowenthal. Mr. Lowenthal is well known to the Vietnamese American community, not only in Orange County but across the country. I talked to you before about adopting prisoners of conscience. Congressman Lowenthal has adopted quite a number of them, including Mr. Nguyễn Tiến Trung and Pastor Nguyễn Công Chính, and now the most venerable TXUUG. And he can explain more on how it works, because he bugs the Vietnamese government so much that they decide to release Pastor Ching and allow him to come here with his entire family. Congressman Lowenthal.
Thank you. As one of the co-chairs of the Vietnam Congressional Caucus, along with my colleagues, Congressman Chris Smith and Congressman, yes, and Congresswoman Zoe Loughran also, yes. We are the leaders of the Congressional Caucus on Vietnam. And I will tell you, it's a very active caucus. Many caucuses in the United States Congress, people come together because they have some kind of association or identity to pull together, and this is one of them. But some caucuses, when they are together, they really are active and they really fight for what they believe in. Others are just in name only. They're more passive rather than active. This is one of the really active caucuses, and I have to attribute much of that to my colleagues who have done a great, Chris Smith and also Zoe Loughran. As pointed out, I represent Little Saigon, much of Little Saigon, which is one of the largest concentration of Vietnamese Americans. I'm not the only representative because it's such a large community that represents Little Saigon, but I have a big chunk of it. And it's been great working with my community on the issues that are very dear and near to BPSOS, but also working with Zoe and Chris, all of us being co-sponsors of the Vietnam Human Rights Act. I think this is a major step forward because it does a number of things. One of the things, and this was led by Chris Smith, is it invokes the Magnitsky Act, which is very important for financial and travel restrictions on those Vietnamese who the President has identified as violators of human rights. It does that, and so we're going to put travel, and we're also going to do financial restrictions on them. It designates what we've all been asking for a long time, Vietnam as a country of particular concern. It never should have come off that list. We are very concerned about its abuses of religious freedom and all its abuses of human rights. As is pointed out in the Act, we also call for an end to the illegal expropriation of properties by Vietnamese Americans. That's part of the Act. And we call for the release of religious and political prisoners. Again, part of it is to make sure that the Congress and the State Department stands up, and we'll talk to you about what we've been doing recently, to these great injustices that are taking place in Vietnam, but also that we keep the attention focused on Vietnam. It's critically important because we here in the Congress are pulled in many different directions. And that's not to say one is more important than the other, but you just have to be around these halls to realize there are thousands of issues going on. Each one could demand your complete attention. So it's really important that we have some places and some coming together, and that's what the Congressional Vietnam Caucus is, to keep our focus on Vietnam. Southeastern Asia is so important, and Vietnam wants to increase its trade with the United States while engaging in bad behavior, and we're not going to stand for that. You know, Vietnam has to change its behavior, and for us to really begin to move forward with a closer relationship. And that's, we're really clear, and we're going to identify what they have, you know, what they're doing poorly, and that, you know, they have to stop these behaviors. And then we will, if they do that, then I think we can talk about other kinds of relationships with Vietnam, but we're not going to reward bad behavior now. And talking about that, one of the things is that all the religious and political prisoners of conscience. I've been fortunate, as pointed out, to be, first I'm a member of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, so it's always important when you're meeting with folks to ask them to join the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, to, you know, to be one part of what they do, because as part of the Human Rights Commission, you don't have to do a whole lot, but one of the things you have the opportunity to do is to come when we have advocates and people who have been discriminated, who come before the Congress. It's usually the Human Rights Commission that invites them here, so it's a great opportunity to hear from people who are advocates for human rights, but it's also an opportunity to adopt prisoners of conscience. And I've been very fortunate in that 3 of my prisoners of conscience, and obviously the Pastor Nguyen Công Chinh, Nguyen Kien Trung, and most recently Nguyen Van Dai, who was an activist. And I think that's because we put pressure on the government to do that. And I'll give you 2 examples of where we are right now. One is, as was pointed out, the next prisoner of conscience that I've adopted is the most venerable Taekwondo. There is no reason that the Supreme Patriarch should be in any way limited in his ability to travel and to be the leader, the religious leader that he is. To have pressure on him, whether it's house arrest or limited travel, is just ridiculous. He is not anyone that the government should fear at all. The government should acknowledge him and realize what an important figure he is, both religiously and historically, for Vietnamese throughout the world. Vietnamese Americans and Vietnamese who are parts of the diaspora elsewhere and in Vietnam. So that's really important. But I also wanted to talk to you what has brought a number of us together here in Congress, and I've been working with not only our caucus, but recently with Representative Gomez from Los Angeles, Representative Al Green from Houston, Representative Culbertson from Texas. I'm sure there are more, Representative Murphy from Florida, and myself. We are appalled at what has happened to William Nguyen, who is a Yale graduate, grew up in Houston, traveled, last residence was in California. Mr. Nguyen was a great student at Yale, graduated. He won this major scholarship to the University in Singapore to get his master's degree, was just completing his master's degree in early June, with graduation going to be, actually the graduation for the master's degree at the major university in Singapore is going to be this coming week. I think it's Friday of this week. And so he traveled in June, early June, to Vietnam on holiday. And while he was there, he saw what he thought was this movement towards democracy in Vietnam. He saw people on the streets, and he wanted to come out and see who were protesting about the giving away to the Chinese communists, a exclusive kind of economic zone that would benefit the Chinese, might others, but benefit the Chinese. And also people were objecting to a cybersecurity law, which was really not a law that is designed to protect the people, the users of social media, but to protect the government and to oversee what was taking place and to control social media. And so people were on the streets objecting to that. And what happened? It was, I think, early June. What happened? He joined that to see these peaceful protests. We have, actually, if you want to see pictures or video of him on my Facebook, we have an account of what his family did. He was trying to actually stop people from getting involved in anything coercive or oppressed towards the government, which allowed for the protesters. Then partially through, he got stopped by people who were undercover in the crowd, and also military. He got beaten, badly hurt, dragged to jail, and we are fighting to get him released, but the Vietnamese have still kept him in jail as of this morning, still have not charged him with anything, but have kept him in jail without having ability to talk to his family or to a lawyer, and it's now been a month. This is outrageous. And we've also talked to the congressional delegation, and we've talked to to our vice president, and to Pompeo, who is visiting Vietnam, to raise this issue that the United States government finds this totally offensive that a U.S. citizen, Vietnamese American citizen, participating in a peaceful way that was allowed by the government, is now beaten up by the government and arrested and not even charged. So we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do, and I'm just here to support you and to say we're going to fight for human rights, and we're going to fight for religious freedom.
Or don't we wish that all members of Congress to be well informed? Well, this is our task today, to visit members of Congress and help them to become as informed as Congressman Donald Trump about Vietnam issues. Oh, can the audience ask you a question? Yes, please. Yes.
I heard that a few thousand Vietnamese were sent to Vietnam recently. Were they like yellow flag people, or they were
No, I'm not. What? Tell me more about this.
I heard that about 7,000 or 8,000 Vietnamese were sent back to Vietnam because they went to
here. Yeah, well, I can just say that this is a whole, you're talking about people who've been deported back to Vietnam. Yeah, this is another issue. I don't really want to get into it. It gets very political. I live in Orange County, at Long Beach and Orange County, which is the southern part. We have a very large Vietnamese community, we have an American community, we have a very large Cambodian American community, and we have a very large Latino American community. So I kind of represent a very diverse district. I personally have been having a difficult time with ICE in that they have identified and taken both Vietnamese Americans, or Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Latinos for deportation. It used to be, the rules were, and I'll just tell you, the rules used to be, if you're here without papers, there was a priority list. If you got stopped or picked up and you had committed a violent crime, and you were going to get deported. If you had not committed any crimes or just done minor offenses, traffic and other things, you would not be on the list to be deported. You would be on the lower list. still wouldn't be wouldn't get moved towards citizenship, but the country was not deporting those. That policy changed under the new administration, which I oppose, but I can understand many of you may support it, but I oppose that policy. And that policy said if anybody is here without documentation, they are subject to being deported immediately. Doesn't mean you could have been in the country 20 or 30 years, never have moved towards getting a green card or towards citizenship, and if you get stopped, you could get deported. Now, I think that people who have committed bad crimes should be deported, but I don't think that policy really is fair to the many people who've been here for 20 or 30 years, both now we're talking about Vietnamese American, who have not done anything but pay their taxes and do what's fair, but they may have had minor offenses in the past and they've never moved towards citizenship. I would like to see that policy change, but that's just me, but that's really what you're talking about. That's right. No, if they're engaging, that's right. If they're engaging in activities that are un-American, then that's true. But I'm saying the line we have to figure out, and the reason why we are in this mess is because we don't have, since 2000, and a long time, but what came out in 2013 was a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform that came out of the Senate with almost 80 votes, and that everybody liked on both sides. It fell apart in the House. It never was taken up for a vote. The problem is we've got to fix that system. It's nobody's fault, but we've got to fix that system and have a reasonable, rational approach to who we're going to can stay and who really needs to go.
Just one more. Just one more.
My name is Congress from Virginia.
Yes.
You know that the Vietnam government just passed a law, cyber security
Yes.
law, that requires Google, Yahoo, and Facebook to install data centers.
Right, to have a physical presence and that's right.
Is there any way we can prevent that?
I led a letter already in the Congress and had other people sign to Facebook and to Google not to do this, that the United States does not. But I think we should be talking to Facebook and to Google directly, their private, and telling them we do not approve, we do not want them spying on Vietnamese. They say there are two issues going on Facebook. They're saying a physical presence, everything's in the cloud, so they're going to, the issue is, can the Vietnamese government or should it have any access to that data? And Facebook and Google say they're not going to give it to them, and we have to make sure that they don't. They're also saying, although we've asked them not to have a physical presence, they say, well, the physical presence won't change any of that, but the government, by forcing them to do that, we thought was a way of doing exactly what you're saying, spying on the people, and we're opposed to it. But that's just another example of this oppressive government that wants to control the thinking of its people and wants to control, not only arrest political dissidents and religious people that they don't disagree with, but to say people should not have access to information. That is, first of all, they're going to fail. You can't stop people from having access. But they're going to make it very difficult, and this is one of the things that we've got to fight for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry that we have to get back to our program. Thank you, Congressman Lowenthal. Now, I'd like to invite Kate Barth. Kate? Oh, yes. Kate is with Freedom Now. And Jared Ganser was the one who co-founded Freedom Now long ago. And Freedom Now has been working with us on a number of issues. Currently, Freedom Now is doing 2 researches on Vietnam issues. And Kate Barth will be describing those 2 efforts that we have been collaborating with Freedom Now. There are many other organizations that have been working with us, and that would reassure us that we are not alone. But we had to take initiative, we had to take the lead, and then many of our friends will come and join us. Thank you, Kate.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And thanks, Tom, for organizing today to talk about these very important issues. So my name is Kate Barth, and as Dr. Tong mentioned, I am the legal director at Freedom Now, which is an NGO that works to free political prisoners all over the world. Unfortunately, we do represent a number of clients currently in Vietnam, and we have been quite dismayed to see Vietnam tighten its repressive grip during this past year. Vietnam is systematically abusive of its citizens across a very wide swath of society. It targets workers, men and women of faith, environmental activists, journalists, bloggers, students, and really any independent voice that questions such abuses. Now, the U.S. enjoys a friendly relationship with the government of Vietnam, but we worry that this friendship may leave behind those Vietnamese who best espouse America's greatest ideals: freedom of speech, freedom of association, and of course, freedom of religion. So I probably don't need to tell this audience, but widespread repression has really been a problem in Vietnam for a very long time. Although I'm sorry to say that unfortunately things are getting worse. The past few years have seen both a de jure crackdown as more and more laws codifying restrictions on human rights are passed, as well as a de facto crackdown as ever more protesters and independent voices are harassed, are beaten, detained, tortured, and often convicted to multi-year sentences. So, concerned about this downward spiral, this year Freedom Now partnered with American University Washington College of Law to interview Vietnamese refugees of political persecution, to study the new restrictive laws that have come into effect, and to produce a report, which will be coming out this fall, on the current climate of fear and repression in the country. And many thanks, Dr. Tong, for assisting us with that research. So our preliminary findings are unfortunately very upsetting. Of the 2 dozen or so Vietnamese refugees that we interviewed for this report, 60% face persecution on account of their religious beliefs. 72% reported that officials took action to suppress their rights to free expression. And perhaps most shockingly, 88% of the participants reported significant due process violations with their case, including torture and abuse. And unfortunately, the legal framework of Vietnam does support this repression. Basic rights, which are guaranteed by the Vietnamese Constitution, such as the right to freedom of belief, expression, association, and assembly, are specifically only allowed to exist to the extent that the exercise of these rights does not threaten the interests of the government or the Communist Party that controls the government. And as was just discussed by Representative Lowenthal, we've seen a cascade of these new cybersecurity regulations come into effect, which basically just enables the government to target and imprison anyone who's going to criticize it online. In 2017, a new media law came into effect, which basically requires the press to eulogize the government policies. This year saw the new law on belief and religion, which increases government control over religious groups and effectively restricts the exercise of religion to only those religious groups and those religious activities which have been pre-approved by the government. Perhaps most disturbingly to us that work in the field of political prisoners and arbitrary detention, an amended criminal code came into effect this year, which lengthens the already very harsh punishments for a slew of absurd association, speech, or assembly-related crimes. This amended code also does something very interesting. It introduces a new range of what we call preparatory offenses. So, for example, now it's not just a crime to undermine the unity policy or spread propaganda, whatever those things mean. It's really hard to know, they're very broad. But it's also a crime to prepare to do any of those things. So just to put this in context for you, before it was a crime to attend a protest. Now maybe it's a crime to be seen walking towards a protest, or maybe even to choose out your outfit in the morning for that protest. I mean, who knows what it means to prepare to go to a protest, right? Before, maybe it was a crime to criticize the government online. Maybe now it's a crime to walk into a cyber cafe. So the government has specifically created these new laws that it can basically use to crack down on anyone it wants. For me personally, as an attorney, I was quite disturbed to see that the new code also turns defense attorneys into mandatory government officials for certain serious crimes. And if the defense attorney doesn't report his or her own client to the government, the defense attorney, him or herself, is now at legal or criminal risk. So this is all very upsetting to hear or think about in the abstract, but the picture is truly heartbreaking when we consider the actual people who have been or will be cut down by these laws. These are often extraordinarily brave men and women who have the courage to stand up for what they believe in. For example, Nguyen Van Hoa is a young journalist for Radio Free Asia, which is a US government-sponsored service. He was arrested in January of 2017 for covering protests against the Formosa steel plant, whose pollution, as I'm sure many of you know, caused a major environmental disaster the year prior. In November of last year, after nearly 11 months in pretrial detention and a trial that lasted less than 3 hours, which is funny because they had 11 months to prepare for it, I think it could be a little longer, he was convicted of spreading propaganda and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Tran Hoang Phuc was a law student who founded the Vietnamese Students for Human Rights Association. He was abducted in April 2017 and beaten very badly before being released. Just 2 months later, in June of 2017, Phuc was arrested for propaganda against the state, which is a favorite charge for the government to lay against its dissidents. Phuc spent 7 months in pretrial detention before receiving a 10-year sentence, 6 years in prison, 4 years under house arrest. Blogger Phan Kim Thom was sentenced in October of 2017 to 6 years in prison after writing anti-corruption articles aimed at government officials. Ko Van Hai is a doctor and a blogger who was sentenced to 6 years, 4 in prison, 2 under house arrest this year in 2018 for writing about education and environment. The list of new arrests just goes on and on and on. I mean, we heard about William Nguyen a moment ago. But I want to make sure we're also not forgetting those prisoners of conscience who've been in jail already for many years. So, for example, you have Nguyen Quoc Doi, who was arrested and has been in detention since 2015 for a Facebook post. Nguyen Huang Quoc Hung, who has been in prison since 2010, so it's 8 years now, for organizing workers at a shoe factory to strike. And Representative Lowenthal has left us, but he was very active with that case. So send my thanks out to him in the abstract, I guess. And then, of course, as I believe Jared mentioned earlier, Father Lee, who was a client of Freedom Now, has spent probably something like 15 years now in various forms of detention. He is unfortunately still under house arrest. So it's a long list. And you know, maybe this goes without saying, but let me just make this clear anyway. Those who have been imprisoned do not enjoy a comfortable detention. Many are horribly, brutally, and inhumanely tortured, really just for exercising their basic human rights. So today, as you go to visit offices and speak with policymakers, please remember that you are speaking not only with your voice, but also with the voice of these prisoners thousands of miles away who have been silenced by the Vietnamese government. So carry those voices with you. Let them speak truth to power with a single unifying message. The Vietnamese government must repeal all of the repressive laws and immediately and unconditionally release all of the political prisoners.
Now is the time for the panel on the status of religious freedom in Vietnam, or the lack thereof. So we are very privileged to have with us here. I can see out there User Commissioner Tom Perkins. Please come and join us. And Dr. Scott Flipsy. I also would like to ask Michelle Nguyen and Mr. Tony Tran. And as we all may have noticed, human rights violations have aggravated in the past 18 to 24 months, and particularly so religious freedom. Many independent religious communities and indigenous communities have been targeted by the government. And atrocities are indescribable. So with us here today, there are very distinguished experts on these issues. And I'm going to ask Carol to introduce them. Thank you. Carol.
Good morning, everyone. So around this time last year, our colleagues at USERF advocated and succeeded in securing the release of Pastor Wing Tongjian, and as a longtime prisoner of conscience, jailed for his religious beliefs. Also, USERF continues to advocate for the most venerable Thich Van Do, the patriarch of the Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam, with the hopes of one day securing his right to seek medical treatment and to practice free speech. Our first guest today is Commissioner Perkins. He has testified before the U.S. Congress on international religious freedom and raised religious freedom concerns with foreign leaders. Commissioner Perkins will continue to expand on the Vietnam-related issues that USERF is focusing on and provide insight to their efforts. He will speak about Vietnam-related issues that USERF is focusing on today. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Perkins.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, you've had 2 cups of coffee. My name is Tony Perkins, and I am honored to join you today representing the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or better known as USERF. I've had the privilege of being a commissioner now for just 1 month, so I'm new on the job, but excited about the opportunity. And this is, please be nice to me, this is my first official event. And I want it to be a good one, okay? As you may know, USERF's mission is to elevate and promote international religious freedom. And we do this by monitoring and reporting on religious freedom conditions abroad and then making policy recommendations to the White House, to the State Department, and to the U.S. Congress. But before I begin, let me first just extend my thanks and my best wishes, and those of USERF, and our sincere thanks to Dr. Tong of the Boat People SOS. I'm grateful for his leadership and for the entire team for the great job they do each year with Vietnam Advocacy Day. But it's not just this, it's this one event, it's what they do year-round on behalf of religious freedom and the ethnic communities in Vietnam. It's outstanding. And let me just say, to me personally, there's nothing more important than advocating for religious freedom. If we do not have the freedom of conscience, we do not have it. And that said, I'm grateful for those who have come to America from Vietnam, like my friend Khan, who escaped communist oppression from the Vietnamese government on an overcrowded boat in 1979, and now he pastors a church in Houston, Texas. And I'm grateful, most grateful, for the fact that he is so passionate about freedom that he is, like many of you in this room, teaching those of us who were born in America why religious freedom is so important. So let me say thank you for helping Americans understand, Native Americans, those born in this country, what we have taken for granted. And that is the freedom of religion and the freedom of conscience. We're actually in our 20th year, and we have seen an increasing number of international stakeholders that have engaged on the issue of religious freedom, or the freedom of belief. At one point, it was a largely U.S.-driven conversation, but now it features voices from all over the world and from all religious backgrounds. In fact, in just a couple of weeks, we're going to have a historical gathering for our Secretary of State hosting a ministerial meeting of leaders from across the world focused on religious freedom. This is a new day for religious freedom, not just in America, but around the world, and you're a part of that. But I have to say, in the same 20-year period, USERF has also seen certain countries trend away from protecting religious freedom, which is the foundation for all other freedoms, for all human rights. They find their core in religious freedom. These countries say that they're committed to international standards, but they do not keep their commitments, often to the detriment of religious believers and non-believers alike. Fortunately, Vietnam is one such country. To be clear, not every religious freedom story from Vietnam is negative. Some religious communities in some areas report little government interference in their activities, and quite frankly, that's how it should be. Government and non-state actors should not interfere in religion, in belief, or non-belief. But no good news story can diminish or negate the fact that many individuals in Vietnam continue to suffer for their faith at the hands of both state and non-state actors. I'd like to underscore just a few examples. First, so-called red flag groups have targeted Catholic communities in 4 provinces of central Vietnam that were hardest hit by a man-made environmental disaster. Catholic parishes across the area stepped in, as the church often does, to assist individuals who lost their livelihoods and spoke out against the government's inadequate response. As a result, pro-government mobs have targeted anyone critical of the government. For instance, in 2017, in Dong Nai, armed men confronted a Catholic priest in the Vinh Diocese. A mob of 300 red flag participants threatened 2 priests. Peaceful critique of the government is not a crime, but extrajudicial attacks in the name of the government are outside the rule of law and are unacceptable. And what has the government done? Well, the red flag groups have intimidated dozens of communities. The answer is nothing. Also, the government has long targeted other vulnerable religious minorities, including Khmer Krom Buddhists, independent Wahao Buddhists, and Cao Dai followers, and Montagnard Christians. Well, let's take a closer look at each of these communities. Vietnamese authorities have appropriated and trampled upon Khmer Krom Buddhist temples, targeting these sacred sites of language, culture, and religion. They also have defrocked and harassed, detained, and arrested Khmer Krom Buddhist monks. Authorities regularly prevent Wahao Buddhists from gathering for annual commemorative services and continue to harass individuals. And this year, shockingly, multi-year prison sentences were imposed on several Wahao Buddhists, including a prominent legal expert who has often assisted victims of religious persecution, and 6 others sentenced for their peaceful advocacy of religious freedom. For years, Vietnamese authorities have pressured Cao Dai followers to join state-sanctioned groups, which the government created more than 2 decades ago, as it helped seize Cao Dai temples from its true followers. And reports continue to surface that Vietnamese authorities detain, imprison, inflict torture, and carry out extrajudicial killings against Montagnard Christians, all while Vietnam is signatory to International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Convention Against Torture. These violations of religious freedom and related human rights occur in the context of Vietnam's new law on belief and religion. Although the government says this law was intended to protect religious freedom, it does not meet international human rights standards. And it would be more than wishful thinking to believe that these Vietnamese authorities are implementing the law better than the government wrote it. In fact, the contrary is true. Activities that had previously been allowed now run afoul of the law, particularly when local authorities manipulate the law's vague language to restrict rights. Whereas authorities previously ensnared religious followers with spurious, unrelated charges like subverting the state, now they can use criminal penalties directly tied to their religious activities. I'd like to take just a moment to talk about prisoners of conscience in Vietnam. These Vietnamese government officials have a long and shameful record of imprisoning religious believers and religious freedom advocates. And even if spared prison, the government and non-state actors frequently prevent these individuals from carrying out religious activities. They harass them, they intimidate them, and they physically assault them. Shockingly, some prisoners and detainees have died in custody after being brutally assaulted and attacked. USURF works to bring much needed attention to Vietnamese prisoners and other prisoners of conscience around the world. First, USURF partners with Tom Lantos Human Rights Project and Amnesty International USA and Defending Freedoms Project, in which members of Congress shine a light on the cases of specific prisoners of conscience. We want Americans to know that there are people around the world simply wanting what they want, freedom, and they're suffering as a result. And last year, USURF launched our Religious Prisoners of Conscience project, in which our commissioners highlight individuals in prison for exercising their freedom of religion or belief. Now, these two initiatives, along with the great work of many non-governmental organizations, help put a human face on religious freedom violations for both the prisoners and their families and their loved ones who suffer as well. And I want you to know there are many, many churches in America praying for those in Vietnam who are being persecuted for their faith. Take, for example, Pastor Nguyen Quang Chen, who was imprisoned for allegedly undermining national solidarity. In addition to torturing Pastor Chen, authorities horribly abused his wife and 5 children while he was in prison, perhaps most brutally after she met with an ambassador at large for international religious freedom, David Saperstein. Pastor Chen was adopted both through Defending Freedoms Project and USURF's Religious Prisoners of Conscience Project. Well, USURF is thrilled that Pastor Chen, and I know he was here, I saw him earlier. He heard I was speaking and he left already. While USURF is thrilled that Pastor Chen was released early and that he and his family are safely in the United States, the reality is he may never be able to return to Vietnam again. Let us not forget the dozens of other prisoners of conscience in Vietnam serving unfair prison sentences, many of them simply for their religious beliefs. These include, as we talked about, it was mentioned earlier, the Buddhist patriarch, Thich Quang Do, who has been confined to house arrest since 2003. My colleague and USURF Vice Chair, Christina Arriaga, has adopted him to highlight his case. And let us not forget the local organizations in Vietnam, many of whom you support, who bravely advocate for prisoners of conscience, such as the Vietnam Coalition Against Torture, the Association of Support of Victims of Torture, and Multi-Faith Roundtable. Clearly, we have a lot of work to do, and that's why I come bearing recommendations from the for the U.S. government, from USURF, regarding religious freedom in Vietnam. First, the State Department should designate Vietnam as a country of particular concern. Clearly meets the criteria for its systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. Secondly, the State Department and others in the U.S. government must continue to consistently raise prisoner cases with the Vietnamese government, and not just during the annual human rights dialogues. This should be a constant issue that is brought before government officials. And third, the U.S. government must employ tools such as the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act to hold accountable Vietnamese officials and agencies responsible for human rights abuses, including particularly severe violations of religious freedom. And fourth, the executive branch and members of Congress should regularly send delegations to Vietnam to focus on religious freedom and related human rights. They should request to visit areas and communities deeply impacted by the government's severe freedom abuses. And anytime we talk about economic development, we should talk about religious freedom. Vietnam doesn't get a pass on human rights abuses. To overlook these violations would be turning our back on the universality of freedom of religion or belief. It would mean tacitly condoning how the Vietnamese government treats religious believers and how it permits non-state actors to abuse them. This is not what international human rights standards prescribe. That is not what we as Americans stand for. Last week, as we celebrated our nation's independence and all of the freedoms that it entails. But these rights that we celebrate and that we hold dear as Americans aren't American rights alone. They are universal rights. No government, group, or individual can truly control another person's conscience. They cannot control their soul. It is up to each and every individual to choose to decide. As long as countries like Vietnam deny rather than protect the precious right to freedom of religion or belief, we must do our part to shine a light on the abuses and hold the perpetrators accountable. Wow. Finally, we can rely on the fantastic work of our friends at Boat People SOS to help guide our efforts. And we are blessed to have the support of so many members of Congress, and I would add an administration that is committed to religious freedom. So my thanks to Boat People SOS, and most of all, our thanks and gratitude to you for being here and making your voices heard.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Perkins. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Michelle Nguyen. She's a member of the sponsoring group for independent Hoa Hao Buddhists in Vietnam. She is also the coordinator of Vietnam Coalition Against Torture, a civil society group specializing in advocacy to abolish torture in Vietnam. She will talk about the subtle and not so subtle forms of persecution against independent Hoa Hao Buddhists. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Nguyen.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, the panelists. Thank you, VPSOS, for giving me the opportunity to be here today to share the sad story of all the sufferings that Hoa Hao Buddhists in Vietnam endure every day. As Carol introduced, I'm the member of the sponsorship for Hoa Hao Buddhists in Vietnam and also the coordinator of Vietnam Coalition Against Torture, or VNCAT. In both capacities, I have worked closely with the different religious communities in Vietnam, especially Hoa Hao Buddhists, and with a very heavy heart, I'm here to share with you that I am very familiar with what they are going through, with their struggles. So it is my duty here to be their voice today and share with you that story. If I may, I would like to take a few minutes to take you back in time and explain a little bit about the histories and the core principle of Hoa Hao Buddhism. So hopefully that will help you to connect the dots and have a better understanding of the reason behind the brutal persecution against the Hoa Hao Buddhist community. Hoa Hao is a branch of Buddhism and is found in 1939 in the southwestern region of Vietnam by Prophet Huyen. Originated from Buddhism, it shares some common principle. Both religions emphasize on compassion, but Hoa Hao Buddhism is unique in a way that it also has elements that deviate from the traditional Buddhist teaching. For example, Buddhism encourages non-attachment. Hoa Hao Buddhists, on the other hand, encourage community involvement, and patriotism. The core teaching of Hoa Hao is a principle called the four debts of gratitude. Gratitude to one's country, gratitude to one's ancestors and parents, gratitude to Buddha, Buddhist teaching, and Buddhist monk. And last but not least, gratitude to fellow countrymen and all mankind. Another important characteristic of Hoa Hao Buddhism is the emphasis on practicing Buddhism at home. Prophet Hun believed that Buddhism should not be only preached in temple, but should be propagated largely into every family. Each individual should see their own homes as a temple and practice Buddhist teaching in their everyday lives. Therefore, where there are Buddhist temples and worshiping facilities, it is very common that Hoa Hao Buddhists practice in their own home. And due to the environment that Hoa Hao was found, it's largely a religion for farmers. So the teaching consists mostly of simple rhythmic processes, which are easier to memorize. Prophet Hun wrote a series of poems. That collection is called the Preaching Through Poetry, and that's a sacred scripture of Hoa Hao Buddhism. So considering the principle and the unique characteristic of Hoa Hao Buddhism, the followers are very involved in their community. They build schools, they set up clinics to provide free medical care, they offer social service. Observing the home worshiping tradition, the private residence can be a worshiping place for their families and also for the local community to come and pray. Also, traditional observations such as death anniversary in the families can also be a religious ritual where families and community come together to pray, to recite, and to study scriptures. But all this changed after 1975 when the Communist North took control of all Vietnam. They implement policies that severely affect how Hoa Hao Buddhists practice their faith. Number one, the government confiscates all properties of Hoa Hao Church. Number two, they confiscate the sacred scriptures and prohibit it from circulations. They published a heavily edited and censored version that was reduced about half in size. And it's only if you want to practice Hoa Hao Buddhism, you have to use a scripture. Otherwise, you can be accused of opposing the government. Number three, they established what is called the Central Hoa Hao Administrative Council and forced all Hoa Hao Buddhists have to be subject to the control of that state-run organization. And number four, very important, they passed religious laws that requires all religious organizations or entities have to register and be vetted and approved by the government in order to operate. So those policies are against the core principles of Hoa Hao Buddhism and severely hinder the practice of these religions. And that's the reason behind the brutal persecutions of Hoa Hao Buddhists. I would like to share with you three typical examples of the relentless oppressions of Hoa Hao followers. The first case is the family of Mr. Bùi Văn Trung. I say family because he's not the only religious prisoner. There are 5 in his family. Their sentence total 24 years imprisonment and 2 years suspended sentence. Mr. Trung and one of his sons are currently behind bar for the second time. All of this because Mr. Trung adhered to the independent home worshiping, and in 2005 he built a prayer hall at his private residence at his home. And the local authority pressured him to close it down, and they started to send police, both uniform and plain clothes. And they mobilized the mobs to come and attack and prevent the Hoa Hao Buddhists in that area to come to pray with them. So they try to put them into a social isolation. They have a small business, and they start causing problems for them. That they even went that far that they went to the market where they do business with, and then they tell the small business, like, don't do business with them. In 2012, the situation escalated when Mr. Chung have a celebration of the death anniversary in the family. So it's again the Hoa Hao tradition. People would come and pray and perform the ritual. The authority came and attack, and they assault the people who come to visit. They surrounded the house. They cut off the power to the house, and they threw rocks into the house, injured some people, and broke the altar. And then after that, they arrest Mr. Chung and his son and accuse them of disturbing public disorder. While they in their home, practicing praying, they were attacked and were arrested and charged with resisting government officials performing their duty and disturbing public disorder. So Mr. Chung was given 4 years in prison and his son 2.5 years. The tragedy did not end there. In 2014, when Mr. Chung and his son were still in prison, they arrested his son-in-law, also with disturbing public disorder, and sentenced this man to 2.5 years in prison. While Mr. Chung served his full 4-year sentence, and he got out with many medical issues. Less than 6 months later, they arrested him again, and this time with his son, the same son that served 2.5 years, his daughter and his wife, and 2 other Hoa Hao Buddhists. Also charged them with disturbing public disorder because they tried to prevent Mr. Chung from organizing another death anniversary of his mother. And this time, Mr. Chung and his son each received 6 years in prison. His daughter got 3 years, and his wife, because she has many medical issues, she received a 2-year suspended sentence. And with his health already deteriorated from the first sentence, and now he's in jail, he's not doing well, and especially that his vision is failing. He cannot really see clearly, and the family tried to send in glasses to help him to read and see, but that was not allowed. And his family really worried for his vision, and he really needs surgery to save his vision. And until now, he's still in prison, and the families have a hard time to send him medication or care package for him. And that's the first case. The second case, also a family. And this family had 3 generations persecuted by the communist government. I should say 4. The patriarch of the family witnessed his own parent killed violently 1 month after another. When he grew up, he practiced Hoa Hao Buddhism, and he was persecuted too. So he, with some other Hoa Hao Buddhists, signed a petition asking the local authority to return some properties of the Hoa Hao Church that they confiscated. But then they turned around and they sold it for personal gain. So they just signed a petition and they were put on the blacklist. And since then he was harassed and he was followed everywhere. He used to have a clinics at home, and he practiced traditional medicine and help people, and he has to close it down too. His wife is very well known in the local community for her charity works, and she also suffered from harassment. People are prevented from coming to her house. The charity trip that she organized gets interrupted. They suffer a lot. And then the worst thing happened on May 2nd of 2017. Mr. Nguyen Hữu Tân is a son from the family. He went out for morning coffee like every other day he did. He never returned home. Around 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, a large police force, several hundreds, came and surrounded the house, took him to the house. They did a house search. They didn't find any evidence that he ever did anything illegal, but they took him away and charged him with disseminating documents opposing the government. So he was taken away shortly before midnight. Less than 10 hours later, again in the next morning, less than 10 hours later, his family was informed that he had committed suicide by cutting his own throat, using a small knife to cut the seals of the police evidence. So when his father was taken to see his body, he saw his son lying on his back in a pool of dry blood, a cut across his throat, so deep that it's ear to ear and his windpipe separated, so his neck bone exposed. Even though the police say he committed suicide, the father notices there's no blood on his hands. But still, they sent his body home in a closed coffin, and hundreds of police surround the house and they cannot have an ordinary funeral for him. Since then, the family gets threatened that they need to accept that he commits suicide, otherwise he will be arrested and charged with aiming to overthrow the government. And the family members were under threat of getting arrested and persecuted that with the help of BNCAT and some other human rights activists in Vietnam. We were able to move them to a safe place, and they are at a better place now. And I also want to personally thank Mr. TEBCHAWS, the Office of Representative Chris Smith, and U.S. Sir, for all your help to raise the case with the State Department and the government of Vietnam. We have some positive progress, but at this time I am not able to share more details, but we have good news. With that, I want to bring to the next case. These are photos of the widow and the son, 9 years old. He's 9 years old. He went to school and he was mistreated at school. Nobody would talk to him, and the teacher didn't want to do anything with him, and they called him like the son of the reactionary man, and he came home distressed. And it's just too bad for him that his mom had to take him out of school. So for a year, the boy didn't get a chance to go to school. So, can you move to the next photo, please? And these are photos of the families and the two brothers that we managed to move to safety, and they are at the meeting with the U.S. consulate in Saigon. And the man who took the picture are the one that I'm going to talk about next. He's another prisoner of conscience, and he has helped the persecuted communities of the religious oppression in Vietnam in many, many occasions, and he's also a close collaborator with U.S. SERV and the State Department. He served as the liaison to many of the persecuted religious community and the human rights activists and civil society organizations to meet with the international human rights organizations or diplomatic missions. As a legal expert, he also provided pro bono legal assistance and training on basic human rights to families of political prisoners and victims of suppressions. In 2006, he was arrested and sentenced to 3.5 years in prison and 2 years of house arrest for his human rights work. After he was released, he continued with his work, and the government suspects him of his assistance to other victims, and they have brought him in for questioning several times, but they couldn't find any evidence that he ever do anything wrong. So on July 30th of last year, 2017, the police abducted him on the street, and on April 5th, 2018, just a few months ago, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison and 3 years of house arrest for carrying out activities aiming to overthrow the government. Since his arrest until now, he's been held at the B14 detention center in Hanoi, 1,000 miles away from his family. His wife has a hard time to come and visit him in prisons, and they only allow to send package or visit once a month, but it's limited to 6 pounds, and the value cannot exceed $2. I repeat, $2. That's all he gets for a month to keep the man alive in prison. He has pre-existing medical condition resulting from the first prison term, but not allowed to receive medication from his wife. He has filed a petition to be moved to a prison closer to home, but so far has not got any response. So I would like to make some recommendations for the short term. I would like to encourage the officials at the U.S. Embassy and Consulate to maintain frequent contact and periodic visits with the victim families. This has proved to be very successful in the past. Number 2, monitor prison condition and treatment of the victims and recommend that they are allowed access to medical care. Have Mr. Bùi Văn Trung sentence temporarily suspended so he can seek medical care and save his vision. Number 3, recommend that the Vietnamese government to move Nguyen Bắc Truyện to a prison closer to his home and lift unreasonable restrictions. For the long term, I hope that you would help to advocate and make these 2 cases a priority in all dialogues with the Vietnamese government. And number 2, consider them for the possibility to be adopted by USCIRF and or the Defending Freedom Project of the Tom Lantis Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle. Just a quick reminder, everyone please turn off your phones during this event. Our next speaker is Dr. Scott Flipsy. He is a Congressional Executive Commission on China. He will talk about how to make use of existing law to prevent religious freedom and further discuss Congressman Smith's push for House Resolution 5621. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Flipsy.
Has the coffee worn off? You're all still alive, awake? Yes! This is an honor for me every year to speak to Vietnamese Americans who have come from many places to lobby on Capitol Hill. I mean, I know I speak a lot to Vietnamese American communities. Have you heard my stories about how I became an honorary sort of Vietnamese? No? No? Well, the first story is that I was working as a young staffer for Congressman Frank Wolf. And, oh, yay. I was paid so little as a legislative assistant that I had to work at the Gap at on the weekends to make ends meet. So I asked him for a raise, and he said, "You work on foreign affairs. That's my passion, but you don't get me elected. Your issues don't get me elected." So the next day, a group from Boat People SOS came into the office and started to talk to me about immigration, particularly the camps that were going to be cleaned. Repatriation started in 1991. So I, with Mr. Wolf, wrote legislation that would transfer immigration quotas from Eastern Europe to Southeast Asia, so more Vietnamese Americans could travel, could come out, could become new Americans, could become new Australians. Vietnamese started showing up at his events, thanking him for all that he's doing, and thanking me for what I did for them. I didn't get the raise. But a lifelong sort of love for the Vietnamese people, for Vietnam, for freedom and democracy there. And you know me as your voice. In Capitol Hill, first with USCIRF, then at the White House, and now in Congress for freedom and democracy. When I was with USCIRF, I had the privilege of meeting the most venerable Taekwondo in his pagoda under house arrest. I met him a couple times. I was allowed to do this. And he said to me in his sort of normal way, laughing, he said, "Dr. Scott, you care so much about the Vietnamese. You must have been a Vietnamese in another life." And I said to him, "Most Venerable, I grew up as a Christian and I don't believe in reincarnation." And he said to me the most perfect thing. He said, "It's not what you believe, it's who you are." So I accept my honorary sort of reincarnation as a Vietnamese and stand in front of you today. I currently work for Senator Marco Rubio and Congressman Chris Smith, the chair and co-chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China. I also work for Congressman Smith on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And it's in that role that I talk to you today. Chris Smith is unfortunate that he cannot be here today. He's traveling. He's going to come in later today from a trip that he did at the Helsinki, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly this weekend. He sends his greetings. So I want to pick up on something here because I think it's important, because I think you're going to do lobbying after this. It's right. So you know, Tony Perkins and Michelle both talked about, you know, the religious freedom problems, the egregious religious freedom problems in Vietnam, and the fact that Vietnam hasn't been named a country of particular concern. So the criteria for a CPC in the law for designation is systematic, egregious, and ongoing abuses of religious freedom. So I ask you, are religious freedom abuses in Vietnam systematic?
Yes.
Are they egregious?
Yes.
Are they ongoing?
Yes.
So what's the issue? I think in part it's because of my many travels and my discussions. I think it's Vietnam gets a pass in part because it's not China. Right? So diplomats there often come from China down to Hanoi and view what happens in Vietnam, and it's much different, we can be honest about that. Things are different in Vietnam, but not necessarily when you look at the numbers. Per capita, Vietnam has as many prisoners of conscience, as many religious prisoners, as China does. There's problems with ethnic minorities, the Khmer Krom, the Montagnard, the Hmong. Same type of you know, sort of distrust, discrimination that goes on among ethnic minorities. The same sort of national securitization of law. If you look at national security laws, if you look at the religion law, if you look at the cybersecurity law, all of them have these vague national security provisions where the government is trying to protect itself from open discussion on the internet, open discussion among the people, open demonstrations against China's influence. So I think that when you talk to people, when you talk to the State Department, I think there is a notion that Vietnam is viewed through the lens that it's not China, but we have to make the case that it is, particularly if you look at the cybersecurity law, because I think it is an exact copy in some ways from what's happening in China. Maybe Mr. Lowenthal, you know, said this to you, but the members of the Vietnam Human Rights Caucus will be sending a letter to Google and to Facebook this week to ask them to sort of push back against the requirements of the cybersecurity law, but also to do more transparent reporting on when they are asked to give up user content or to block user content. So that is something that right now is going on. The members of the Vietnam Caucus, which is chaired by Chris Smith, and it's Congressman Lowenthal and Congresswoman Lofgren are the chairs of that. But we should be asking for more members to be engaged as well. We need more members engaged in that caucus. because I think we need to speak unified, with a unified voice, both to the State Department, but also to the Vietnamese government. We recently wrote a letter on behalf of the detained American Will Nguyen. Right, so, right? And I called the Vietnamese embassy to register Mr. Smith's sort of concern about the detention and urging them to release him unconditionally and quickly. My friends at the Vietnamese embassy, because I interacted with them often on cases, tell me that I shouldn't, and the congressman shouldn't spend so much time on little things, right? Small things, right? But look at the bigger picture. And my response is often that I've been to your jails. You've allowed me to go to see prisoners. I've made friends with Vietnamese dissidents. I have gone to the far reaches of Vietnam. I've been to Sac Trong, I've been to Dien Bien. I've been all over Vietnam. You've allowed me to go there. I've made friends who are your best and your brightest. And they're in jail. They're harassed. They're discriminated against. And I say the personal for me is political, to sort of borrow a phrase, an old phrase. And that it will be political for all members of Congress if their constituents, they're hearing from their constituents about who's in jail, who's harassed, who is under house arrest, who dies mysteriously in custody. These type of things, I think, are important to raise to members of Congress today. I'm also here to talk about the Vietnam Human Rights Act, which is 5621. Many of you know that Congressman Chris Smith has offered this many times in the past. It's passed in the House. It has not succeeded to pass in the Senate. This year, I think there's hope, reigns eternal, mostly because of the bad actions of the Vietnamese government, unfortunately. So we are in the midst of discussions at the House Foreign Affairs Committee to mark up that bill, hopefully this month. That is the plan. We were hoping to do it before the 4th of July, but it didn't happen. So we're hoping to get that out of the House and over to the Senate, where we will need the help of your community again to do the heavy lift to try to pass that bill in the Senate. I've also been asked to talk a little bit about global Magnitsky. Because one of the things that's changed in the new Vietnamese Human Rights Act, Vietnam Human Rights Act, is that we took out the sanctions, the economic sanctions, the broad-ranging economic sanctions, and we focused in on the individual sanctions available both in the Executive Order 13818, 808, 818. Yeah, the President's Executive Order sort of talking about implementing the global Magnitsky and global Magnitsky itself. The Helsinki Commission, I was part of a group of people that helped draft the Magnitsky Act and the global Magnitsky Act, and for Chris Smith, who was the lead House Republican on both those bills. The Helsinki Commission on their website right now has a how-to guide. What you as a community or as activists would need to do. It's a step-by-step to how do you identify, how do you build evidence, who do you send it to, what's the process. So I think that there's a step-by-step guide that's on the website of the Helsinki Commission. We have put together various I guess they would be listening sessions and teaching sessions for different groups. We can hold those again. But I think it's important, right? When I meet groups like yours, I say there's three I's. There's three I's to sort of being influential in Washington. One is better information, right? Better intelligence. I mean, you have that, right? I mean, Michelle was talking about the Wahao community. You know more than we do. You often know more and quicker than the State Department. you know more about what's happening in your communities, that information needs to be given to us, given to the State Department in a way that can be usable. Second, it's better ideas. That's my domain, right? Policy focused issues, but better ideas. How do you deal with the issues that come up in your information? And the last thing is political influence, right? And that's something that this group represents. So, again, I want to sort of encourage you to sort of organize, to talk about these issues with your representatives, and to use the tools that are available to you within the Congress, and to sort of talk to your friends in Congress, including the senator who just walked in, who is a fantastic advocate for the Vietnamese community. So, again, thank you very much. I'm going to cede my time to the senator from Texas.
Now, I would like to ask Commissioner Andy Vinson-Hung from Tarrant County, from your state, Senator, to come here and give a very quick, brief introduction.
Well, y'all know Texas is big. In fact, everything in Texas is supersized. So Senator John Cornyn, aka Big John, is from Houston and grew up in San Antonio. He graduated from Trinity University in journalism and St. Mary's Law School. In 1979, he became a state district court judge in Bexar County. In 1990, he was elected to the Texas Supreme Court and was re-elected in 1996. In 1995, he earned a master's degree in law. So, serving in the Supreme Court justice, he still took the time to obtain his master's degree. In 1997, he was elected as a Texas Attorney General. In 2002, he was elected as the U.S. Senator representing the great state of Texas. Senator Cornyn has many achievements, which I'm not going to read it all, but I would like to highlight a few. He co-founded the bipartisan Senate India caucus to promote U.S.-India bilateral relations. He was recognized and awarded by the Project on Government Oversight with the first Bipartisan Leadership Award in honor of his dedication to issues of government oversight and transparency. He is a three-time recipient of the Hero of the Taxpayer Award from the Americans for Tax Reform. He was awarded the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network Crime Fighter Award and the Children at Risk Founders Award for his legislative works to help end the red kit backlog and protect the victim of child exploitation. He was named by the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce as a Small Business Advocate of the Year in 2013. Senator Cornyn is currently serving his third term as U.S. Senator from Texas and currently serves as the Majority Whip. Senator Cornyn, along with Senators Rubio of Florida, Boozman of Arkansas, and Cassidy of Los Angeles, introduced the Vietnam Human Rights Sanction Act on July 19, 2017 that would impose sanctions and travel restrictions on Vietnamese nationals who are complicit in human rights abuse against the Vietnamese people. Senator Cornyn married to his wife Sandy in 1977, 2 years after the fall of Saigon in 1975. Hopefully that will help you remember the anniversary. That's 41 years of marriage, and to me that is a huge achievement. They have 2 grown children. My dear friends, help me welcome Big John.
Well, that was a
wonderful introduction. My friend Nguyen, who serves as, of course, Tarrant County Commissioner. It's great to see Vietnamese Americans making great contributions to the United States at places from all across the country and serving in public office like the Commissioner. After his great introduction, I feel like I ought to sit down and be quiet, because I don't want to detract at all from his wonderful introduction, but it did remind me of a discussion I had with Congressman Ted Poe. We were at a Korean-American community event a few years ago, and Congressman Poe stood up and he tried to explain the difference between y'all and all y'all. He said one was plural and the other was singular. I'm not sure he made much of an impression on any of us. Let me just say what a great honor it is to be back with you again this year. And I think it's very important for us all to get together, as we do each year, to celebrate the evolving relationship between Vietnam and the United States, and to talk about and to plan on ways we can promote the democratic values and encourage human rights and religious freedom that need to be respected and which historically have not been respected by the government of Vietnam. I remain hopeful and optimistic regarding inroads that this administration is making in the region, but I'm also concerned, as usual, about the conduct of the Vietnamese government. As you know, last year President Trump visited Vietnam, where he attended the APEC summit and met with leaders about countering aggressive Chinese military expansion in the Pacific. The President also secured new commitments from Vietnam to apply pressure to North Korea to end its nuclear weapons program and reach an agreement for the U.S. to construct a new embassy in Hanoi. All of that's good news. It shows that our two countries are working more closely together than ever, and that President Trump's administration has the desire and ability to maintain a constructive working relationship with the Vietnamese government and President Quang. Now the bad news. The bad news is that Vietnam still has a long way to go, especially when it comes to international legal standards and human rights. In 2018, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom recommended designating Vietnam as a country of particular concern. The Commission was quick to note that while there's been a problem with the central government threatening religious followers and their property for a long time, these actions actually intensified in 2017. Red flag militants harassed Catholics. Police officers detained activists, abducted Buddhist leaders, and prevented them from carrying out renovations of facilities where they worship. And perhaps most noteworthy is the new Vietnamese law on belief and religion, which takes a flawed approach that's inconsistent with international covenants. Vietnam's issues are not confined, though, to religious liberty. We know your group is familiar with the country's cybersecurity law, which will stymie, no doubt, free speech online and require companies to hand over large amounts of data to the government, data which they no doubt will use to surveil and track their own people. You've probably heard about the crackdowns on public protests, like Will Nguyen, the Houston native who was arrested earlier this summer in Ho Chi Minh City after he protested the special economic zones, which many fear will be dominated by Chinese interests. He was brutally beaten and dragged into the back of a police truck. 2 weeks ago, I and other members of the Texas congressional delegation sent a bipartisan letter to Vietnam's ambassador in Washington demanding fair and humane treatment for Mr. Nguyen. We also asked for an official meeting to discuss getting him back to the United States as soon as possible. We're still waiting for a response. But I am pleased that Secretary of State Pompeo raised Mr. Nguyen's case with during his visit with Vietnam General Secretary and Prime Minister just this week. That's encouraging. You've heard the expression, "Don't mess with Texas"? Yeah. Well, it applies here. When someone messes with a fellow Texan, we take it very seriously. So we're going to continue to work with the Trump administration and all of you to secure Mr. Nguyen's release. I know Ambassador Brownback, the who is not here today with us, but who is a good friend of mine and now serves in a very important role, as well as Ambassador Kittenbrick and Commissioner Mezuna, and many others are working hard to remedy these and other problems that continue to plague Vietnam, a proud nation with a rich and vibrant culture. And I look forward to working alongside of them and you every step of the way. Because for me, it's a great privilege to serve people of Vietnamese origin. I'm always quick to tell people, well, I usually ask them first. I say, do you know what the third most commonly spoken language is in Texas today? And they scratch their heads. They say, after English, after Spanish, and they usually guess wrong. And I say, no, it's Vietnamese. And they look at me. Our Vietnamese Americans who have immigrated to our country are a tremendous asset and make wonderful contributions to our culture and our communities and our state and nation. And it's my proud honor to represent all of them in Texas. After the fall of Saigon in 1975, many Vietnamese moved to coastal communities in Texas, and there are roughly 110,000 Vietnamese Americans who moved to the Houston area alone. And as I said, it is the third most commonly spoken language in our state. Some are wondering whether English is one of those languages that Texans speak well, but that's another story. Well, we saw the contribution of the Vietnamese American community during Hurricane Harvey just this last year. I'm thinking about Father Tran and parishes like St. Peter's and Rockport. I'm thinking about a Buddhist temple in Houston, a nail shop in Refugio run by a Vietnamese woman named Lisa. The rains came and all of these facilities flooded. The Vietnamese community came together. Even with so much water and parts of their towns looking like oceans, they proved that no man and no woman is an island. They work together to recover and to rebuild. The Vietnamese contribution to our economy and our society is indisputable. Around Texas and the entire country, so many Vietnamese families embody the American dream. So here in Congress, we'll continue to work alongside of you to support you in helping to achieve that dream for more Vietnam people of Vietnamese descent. And we'll work hard to support your brothers and sisters back home in Vietnam so they can achieve the dreams of their own. One way we're doing that is through the Vietnam Human Rights Sanctions Act, which was reintroduced last year. This imposes travel restrictions and other sanctions on Vietnamese nationals who are complicit in human rights abuses against their fellow citizens. These sanctions will not be lifted until the Vietnamese government releases all political prisoners and stops using violence against peaceful demonstrators. While our bilateral ties continue to deepen in many respects, it should also be clear that the U.S.-Vietnam relationship cannot truly progress while Vietnam's human rights record continues to deteriorate. To that end, I'll continue to urge the President and his administration to reiterate the United States' dedication to human rights, not just in Vietnam, but around the world. So thank you for showing up again today. Thank you for your courage in speaking out. This meeting and this movement are vital to the fight for human rights in Vietnam and around the world. And I remain hopeful that working together, the future will bring a fair and free Vietnam committed to democratic values and the rule of law. So with that, thank you again for letting me come by and share a few words of encouragement, I hope, and join with you and welcome you to Washington. Thank you very much.
Now it is my honor to invite Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Scott Busby, a very good friend. And he's with, as many of you have already met him, he's with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. And Scott is a Vietnam expert, as much as the other Scott, Scott Fipsey. So, Mr. Busby, Scott, please.
Thank you.
you, Dr. Tong, and thanks to both People SOS for hosting this. It's so great to see so many human rights advocates in one room together. DRL is only one part of the State Department, and sometimes we get kind of lonely and wonder whether there's anyone else out there in the world who cares about human rights. So when I see this many people who have come to Washington, in many cases from far away, it's inspiring to me, it's inspiring to us. It reminds us that, yes, human rights is important to a lot of people out there in the US. And it's particularly important that you make it clear to members of Congress and to others how important human rights is in Vietnam. As Senator Corden said, the U.S.-Vietnam relationship continues to be a very important one. As he mentioned, President Trump visited last year there for the APEC summit. The USS Carl Vinson recently visited Vietnam, first time since the Vietnam War that a vessel of that size has been, a U.S. aircraft carrier, has visited Vietnam. It's also significant. You know, Vietnam, for all of its issues, still wants a very strong relationship with the United States. Why? Not only because I think there are certain affinities between the U.S. and the Vietnamese people, but Vietnam is very concerned, shall we say, afraid about its big neighbor to the north, China. And that gives us, the U.S. government, that gives you, I think, an opening, an opportunity. Vietnam wants a relationship with us. And we continue to say to them, if you want a strong relationship with us, if you want to be assured of U.S. support and assistance in hedging against Chinese efforts to intrude on the South China Sea, to do other things throughout the region, then you need to improve human rights. The relationship is not only about military assistance, it's not only about economic assistance, it's not only about student exchanges, it's about how you treat your own people. So, I can't emphasize to you enough how important it is that you make that point clear to your various representatives with whom you'll be speaking, that you make that point clear to the Vietnamese government when you interact with the Vietnamese government, and that you remind the American people who may not be as interested in Vietnam that human rights abuses continue in Vietnam, and that the American people needs to keep its eye on the ball when it comes to human rights in Vietnam. Now, there have been some positive things that have happened in Vietnam when it comes to human rights. The overall number of political prisoners compared to where it was, say, a decade ago is slightly lower, although it's gone up recently. Lots of Vietnamese are using Facebook. I have a number of Vietnamese friends who are Facebook friends. In fact, some of them are probably in this room. And so during the recent protests, someone tagged me in one of their Facebook posts, and I all of a sudden got dozens of other Vietnamese, some in Vietnam, no doubt some in the United States, who wanted to be my Facebook friend. And I saw how much information and how views get exchanged through Facebook and other mediums about the situation in Vietnam. These are positive things. In terms of our relationship, discussions with the Vietnamese government, we recently did have our annual human rights dialogue, which is sometimes a frustrating affair because their diplomats come with prepared talking points on what they are to say in response to the concerns that we raise. They don't have the freedom, flexibility to really negotiate with us around what's happening. But we do have frank discussions about some issues. On the religion law, they have been open to hearing our concerns. They have indicated they are open to discussing the ways in which this law will be implemented further with us. We're not happy with the law. We still believe that there are fundamental restrictions on freedom of religion in Vietnam. But they're willing to talk to us and make some adjustments. You all probably know they did this past year grant permission to American pastor Franklin Graham to hold one of the largest prayer rallies ever held in Vietnam, which tens of thousands of people participated in. So we think that's a positive. They did release my good friend Nguyen Van Dai and his colleague recently after lots of pressure from us, from the German government, from others. But they would release him only on the condition, of course, that he leave the country, which is not, those terms are not acceptable to us. We will not push for that ourselves. We will only move forward with that type of solution where the individual in question agrees to it. But it's still good that Nguyen Van Dai is out of jail. He's one of my Facebook friends, and I can see that he's already extremely active in continuing to push for democracy and human rights in the way that he always has. All this said, the situation in Vietnam, the human rights situation in Vietnam continues to be of great concern to us. The number of arrests of people exercising their rights to freedom of expression, freedom of religion has gone up this year. The sentences being imposed on people who have freely expressed their opinions have gone up. The government is much more in a clampdown mode. As Senator Cornyn mentioned, we're very concerned about this recent cybersecurity law, which, if implemented in the way that it's been drafted, could greatly restrict the ability of people like you and like your friends and family in Vietnam to use platforms like Facebook. So we're also raising that concern with Vietnam. We were particularly focused on and concerned about the crackdown on the people engaged in protests around the creation of these special economic zones throughout Vietnam. We have been particularly focused on the case of William Nguyen, as Senator Cornyn mentioned, and indeed Secretary Pompeo was just in Vietnam, and one of his chief talking points was to raise concerns about treatment of William Nguyen. But he, in his talking points, was not only that case, but the many other cases of prisoners of conscience who we believe should be released. We are particularly focused on the case of Mother Mushroom, whose official name is Nguyen Ngoc Nu Quinn. She received the International Women of Courage Award last year at a ceremony where the First Lady participated. We're continuing to press the government to release her as well as her mother, and we're hopeful that we may have success in her case very soon. But let me go back to you and your role. Yes, it's important that we at the State Department continue to press the Vietnamese government about its human rights abuses, to release the prisoners of conscience, to moderate implementation of the many laws it's adopted that restrict human rights. One of the things we pressed them on in the Human Rights Dialogue was to get rid of these vague national security laws that they use to imprison human rights activists. Laws that say prohibit abuse of democratic freedoms. What does that mean? Laws that prohibit any criticism of the government. These laws can be used in any way the government wants. We've told them that these are simply unacceptable laws. But it can't be only the State Department that pressures the Vietnamese government. We need people like you, not only to tell us what we should be doing, but to be telling the Vietnamese government what it should be doing. We need you to raise your voices in your communities. We need you to raise your voices with the Vietnamese embassy here. Believe it or not, the Vietnamese embassy here and the Vietnamese government cares if lots of people like you and other Americans are concerned about the situation of an individual prisoner of conscience or other people, or about a law. As Senator Cornyn and Scott Flipsy mentioned, you should also be engaging with companies like Facebook and Google to make them aware of your concern, to make them aware of the ways in which this new law will not only make it more difficult for them to do business in Vietnam, they know that very well, but will make it very difficult for the average person in Vietnam to receive the information they want and to communicate with one another in the ways in which they've been doing. So I know that you have come to Washington to make your voices heard here. I think it's great that you are doing that. I think you need to continue to do that in your communities, with the Vietnamese government, with frankly whoever you come into contact with. Because the more people that stay focused on the human rights situation in Vietnam, the more people who raise their voices about the human rights situation in Vietnam, the more likely we will achieve the long-lasting change we're looking for. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Scott. I'd like to ask the two panelists here to address questions to Mr. Busby. Before you're right, Michelle here brought up the case of the Hoa Hao Buddhist, the prisoner of conscience, and one of them is high on our list of concern, and that is Mr. Repression. So I'd like to ask Michelle to raise the question. And Tony here, he's very much on top of the Red Flag Association activities in Vietnam. And Tony might give you some updates and then have a question or two on that as well, on what the State Department can do to push back the instrument being used by Vietnam to persecute or suppress Catholics in the Vinh Diocese. So Michelle.
Thank you so much. I would like to bring to your attention the case of Mr. Nguyen Bach Truyen. He's a very effective human rights and religious rights activist in Vietnam. And he has been very instrumental in the collaborations with He's a great collaborator, and he has worked closely with U.S. SERV and the staff of the U.S. embassies and consulates both in Hanoi and Vietnam. He's also the interface between the human rights activists and religious communities in Vietnam with the international communities. But for all of his work, it's always been peaceful. He never committed any illegal acts. But then he was abducted on the streets without an arrest warrant. And he was held incommunicado for a month. Only 2 weeks before his trial, he was allowed to meet with his lawyer. And in a one-day trial, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison, followed by 3 years of house arrest. And he currently being held in a prison in Hanoi, 1,000 miles from his house. And the government has been giving his wife so much difficulties every time she tried to go and meet with him. Every month, he was allowed one visit and only get sent in 6 pounds of supplies at worth less than $2. So my question is that within the capacities of the diplomatic mission and the State Department, what can you do to raise the case and make sure that it's the priority because of the effectiveness of his work? He deserved to be free, and he deserved to be continuing with his work. So that's my question for you.
Thank you for bringing the case to my attention. I note that he was one of the original founders of Brotherhood for Democracy, and I can tell you that in the context of the human rights dialogue, and generally when we engage with the government, we raise all of these cases as among our highest priorities. I don't know what we've done specifically on his case. We'll need to go to the embassy and inquire, but I guess that because of his prominence and because of the severity of his sentence, that this will be one of the cases that we're focusing our attention on. The way we do this is by raising it in senior level meetings that we have, by raising it in Human Rights Dialogue. As part of the Human Rights Dialogue, we pass the list of political prisoners over to the Vietnam side to say these are cases we're concerned about. I'm confident that his case was among those that we passed to them.
Thank you very much. And both Ms. Palmers and Ms. Ponches in Vietnam is very familiar with him. They have worked with him in the past before his arrest, so please contact him.
He looks familiar to me too. I may have met him on one of my visits to Vietnam as well. So. Anyway, thank you for reminding me about the case, and we'll do what we can.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want to raise the red flag? The red flag association.
Thank you, boss. There is Commissioner Tom and Dr. Scott Spacey and Senator Tom Congress just mentioned about a new phenomenon in Vietnam that very concerned for us recently, and there is the Red Flag Association. In the past years, I have been written quite a few reports to the UN Special Rapporteurs about the Red Flag Association that intimidated and persecuted some Paris in Vietnam, especially in Diocese of Vinh. And the Red Flag Association members is the first seen in the Vinh Diocese in May of 2017, and they start persecuted parishioner in the Song Ngọc Parish, where they, for the whole month, they continue to persecute the parishioner in attack them, beating them, and cause all kinds of problems, and isolate all the Catholics and the non-Catholic, and cause many disturbance in the parish. And then after that, they continue to do that in another parish in Dong Kieu, also in Nghệ An province, where they demand to expel the parish pastor Nguyễn Ngọc Ngữ from the parish, and also intimidate, beating many parishioners. And recently, on the December 2017, in the Kẻ Gai parish, where there are hundreds of the Red Flag members, and accompanied by the government official and the police official, to attack a group of men and women who working on the parish land. And after that, the victims filed a complaint to investigate it and to ask them to ask government for action, and the response from the government is
about Nguyễn Bắc Truyện. I was in Frankfurt, and actually we got a get together with Nguyễn Văn Đài and his wife and Lê Thu Hà, and I know that the good news is that the German government is interested in this case, and they are willing to work together with the State Department on this case as well. Thank you.
Can I mention?
Sure, please.
Scott Flipsy mentioned Global Magnitsky, and I know some of you have raised Global Magnitsky with us as well. We are looking hard at an appropriate Vietnamese targeting Global Magnitsky. Unfortunately, there are a lot of bad people in the world and a lot of priority human rights situations, so it's sometimes hard to decide which country to focus on, but Vietnam is among the countries we're looking closely at. So the information you've been providing us, the recommendations, is being looked at, and I hope that we'll be able to act on a Vietnamese case sometime soon. Thank you.
Rồi với lại tất cả phát biểu câu hỏi nhận định thì chúng ta xong cái phần plenary session họp khoáng đại. Hy vọng là mọi người còn nhớ rằng một vài cái điểm là rất quan trọng. Tiếng nói của chúng ta rất là quan trọng, đúng không ạ? Các dân biểu cũng nói vậy, rồi bên Ủy hội Hoa Kỳ tự do tôn giáo cũng nói vậy, và ngay cả bên Bộ Ngoại giao cũng nói vậy. Bởi nếu không có tiếng nói của chúng ta thì thứ nhất họ không biết, cái thứ hai họ biết họ muốn ủng hộ chúng ta thì họ có thể nương của chúng ta nói đấy, cộng đồng người Mỹ gốc Việt rất là quan tâm. Khi mà họ nói chuyện với những người khác đồng viện của họ, hoặc họ nói chuyện với tòa đại sứ của Việt Nam, hoặc là với chính quyền Việt Nam, họ cần chúng ta và chúng ta cần họ. Cái sự hiện diện ở đây rất là quan trọng. Và hôm nay chúng ta sẽ đi để mà nói chuyện với rất nhiều người, nhưng mà đừng có lo rằng là chúng ta nói không hết chuyện, bởi vì chúng ta sẽ còn tiếp tục quay trở lại với họ rất nhiều lần. Xin cảm ơn tất cả quý vị. Tự vỗ tay một cái. Một vài cái thông báo sắp sửa tới đây là chúng ta chia ra thành phái đoàn để mà